下面有请 Noodle 创始人兼首席执行官 John Katzman、俄罗斯莫斯科国立师范大学校长 Alexey Lubkov、耶路撒冷希伯来大学前校长 Hanoch Gutfreund、Minerva 大学创始人、董事长兼首席执行官 Ben Nelson. Let's welcome the founder and CEO of Noodle, John Katzman, the rector of Moscow Pedagogical State University, Alexey Lubkov, the former president of Hebrew University of Jerusalem, Hanoch Gutfreund, the founder, chairman, and CEO of the Minerva project, Ben Nelson.
Good afternoon, or good morning. My name is John Katzman. I am a serial entrepreneur in education. I created the Princeton Review and then 2U, and now a group of companies called the Noodle companies. I've also served on a bunch of boards, and what I'd like to do is frame the conversation very, very briefly. There are really two parts of innovation in higher education to think about. The first is what happens in the classroom and innovation in the classroom itself. And some of the things I think about that I'm curious about your opinions. One, a lot of the things we're doing, competency-based education, adaptive learning, makes it very hard or might conflict with the notion that education is fundamentally social. It is among people, and how do you think about all working together if everybody is doing something different? Two, online education started in a mindset that everything is global, but increasingly online learners are studying close to home. In the US, 65% of people studying online in higher ed are within 50 miles of the school, which brings up the question of how you think about agility, schools' ability to move seamlessly between online and on campus. And the question of lectures, one of the things that always amazes me about a setting like this is that people come in to talk about 21st century learning, but describe it in 19th century methodologies, and how do we really move to some of the things we talk about? And finally, in terms of the classroom, how do we measure the efficacy of what we're doing? And is that an important part of where the future is? In terms of the setting, very briefly, cost is an issue. If you think about the cost of creating a book, it might be $50,000 US, but a video game is $25 million and a movie is $100 million. Are we going to be in a race to spend a great deal of money on pedagogy? How do schools collaborate in very different ways than they have before, at scale, to try to keep that cost down? Where does faculty go? There's a lot of research that nothing is more important than the students' relationship with faculty and with each other, but many of the innovations that I've seen speak to getting rid of faculty. How does that play out? Where is the centrality of the professor? And finally, in a world with artificial intelligence and robotics disrupting one industry after another, many people believe that the best education to prepare people for the next century is a liberal arts education, a broad, well, I'll let Ben describe it. And how do you feel about the tendency towards much more training for an immediate job versus a long-term view? So with that.
Дамы и господа, я хотел бы поблагодарить за возможность принять участие в этом замечательном саммите и выразить надежду на его успешную работу и завершение от имени нашего университета и от всех университетов России.
女士们、先生们，大家好。仅代表莫斯科国立师范大学向大家向今天的主办方表示衷心的感谢，也预祝此次会议、此次大会成功。
Для нас тема соотношения традиций и инноваций сегодня ключевое в системе образования и в системе высшего образования в частности.
对于我们大学，对于我们国家，传统和创新之间的关系，今天非常重要。
Тот, кто, обращаясь к старому, способен открывать новое, достоин быть учителем. Так сказал великий Конфуций.
伟大的孔子曾经说过：“温故而知新，可以为师矣。”
И применительно к сегодняшнему дню эти слова особенно актуальны, так как, по сути, говорят об инновации с опорой на традицию, об имманентном присутствии традиции в любой инновации и о ключевой роли учителя в диалектическом единстве инноваций и традиций.
这些话在今天也具有现实意义，因为实际意思指的是基于传统的创新，传统在任何创新中的存在，以及关于教师在创新和传统辩证统一方面的关键性作用。
Традиции и инновации неразрывно взаимосвязаны на метафизическом философском уровне, как инь и янь в китайской философии.
传统和创新在形而上学的哲学层面上有着千丝万缕的联系，就像中国哲学中的阴阳一样。
Именно университет представляет собой центр генерирования инноваций, внедряемых на всех уровнях образования и в самых разных областях науки. В то же время именно университет является хранителем традиций и ключевым звеном в системе формирования ценностей, лежащих и в основе любой традиции, и в основе любой инновации.
大学是各个教育和各学科领域创新的中心，同时，大学是传统的守护者，是形成任何传统和创新价值观体系的关键环节。
Без системы ценностей никакая инновация невозможна.
没有价值体系、价值观体系，任何创新都是不可能的。
Само понятие инноваций в сфере высшего образования очень многоаспектно и по своей сути неисчерпаемо. Вместе с тем можно выделить основные смысловые содержания этого понятия применительно к высшему образованию.
高等教育创新的概念是一个多层面的概念，其本质的丰富的。然而，可以指出这一概念在高等教育中的基本含义。
Это то, что мы называем развитием или нововведением, разработкой внедрения актуальных, востребованных, имеющих новизну содержания педагогических изменений.
创新，研究和运用所需要的和内容新颖的教学技术。
Получение нового качества, прежде всего выпускников и самих преподавателей.
获得新的品质，特别是毕业生和教师本身提高自身素养。
Повышение конкурентоспособности всего того, что составляет многоаспектное понятие университет, в том числе выпускников, преподавателей, исследователей, технологий, инфраструктуры и всех других ресурсов.
提高大学多层面的竞争力，包括毕业生、教师、研究人员、技术、基础设施和资源的竞争力。
И, наконец, это то, что направлено на обновление общества на всех уровнях.
也重点关注社会各层面的更新。
Наш университет реализует самый широкий спектр инновационных проектов среди которых особое место занимают проведение научных фундаментальных исследований,
莫斯科国立师范大学是一所基于传统创新的大学。
различные программы магистерской подготовки,
我们有一系列创新的项目，包括演示课程、教育学研究方向是创新小学。
это и разработка образовательных технологий в условиях информатизации и цифровизации образования,
硕士课程创新理论研究方向是信息和通讯领域的创新。
и это разработка новых технологий образовательной, воспитательной, социальной и молодежной работы в области педагогики и в других сферах социальной жизни.
研究新技术以培养青年人，包括领导活动与天才儿童交流、寻找和培养人才等领域。
Но самое главное для нас – это основа любой инновации, это человек, и именно человек как познающая и творческая личность, человек как микрокосм, как носитель ценностей, знаний и компетенций, и источник инновации, и ее движущая сила, ее цель, и ее объект.
任何创新的理论基础都是人，有知识并有创造力的人。人为一小天地，具有价值观、知识和能力。人是创新的源泉、驱动力以及目的和目标。
Международная академическая кооперация и корпорация – это важнейшая основа стабильного инновационного развития человеческого капитала.
国际学术合作与团体是全世界和每个国家稳定创新发展人力资源的重要基础。
И один из аспектов миссии академического и университетского сообщества – это укрепление во всем мире подхода к оценке каждого человека, прежде всего как ресурса и как капитала, носителя и хранителя, приумножителя ценностей, ориентиров, знаний и компетенций.
学术界的一大使命是在全世界范围内让人们知道，评价一个人，首先不是把他当做一个资源，而是把他看作一种资本，看作知识技能的载体，看作有价值目标的实现者。
И мы открыты к широкому сотрудничеству, широкой кооперации во имя будущего для всех.
我们愿意展开合作，因为大学之间合作是非常好，合作才有未来。
谢谢。
Okay. Now, in my introductory remarks, I'll make a few more general remarks, and I should refer maybe to the specific questions posed by our moderator later in the discussion. Now, the challenge that we are facing today is how to prepare the young for the future world. Now, it will be trivial now if I begin to explain to you and to tell you what it means when we say the future world. We all know that it is a world of changing technologies. It is a world of fast changing professions, professions disappearing, new professions emerging. And the question is, how do we prepare our young to live, to succeed, and to operate in such a world? Now, society, mankind, for its well-being, depends on continuous sustainable innovation. What do we mean by innovation is something that should be addressed, because innovation was there all the time, the history of mankind. If there would not be innovation, we would still live in caves. But today when we talk about innovation, we mean something very different. Innovation today is composed of good ideas combined with enterprises, with entrepreneurship, with a large number of players in the public, private, political sector. Innovation depends on political agreement. Innovation is a whole mindset. The question is, how can we prepare our young to this new mindset? Now, universities, the mode of operation of universities, and I will emphasize universities, but the entire educational system should face that challenge. Universities, the mode of operation of universities today is the most effective way to meet this challenge. So the question is, what can and should universities do? Yesterday, we heard illuminating presentations by Carl Wieman about the way of learning and teaching, then a panel discussion about the problems of assessment. I do not mean that in my introductory remark. The whole structure of universities is not adapted most effectively to that. Universities today are based on disciplinary structure. The division into disciplines is not very helpful to teach and to prepare players for the future, where every issue is more phenomenology-based than disciplinary-based. So we should have a structure which allows more interdisciplinary units and interdisciplinary centers. And we should have an atmosphere, and later I will tell you what my university is doing in this respect. We should have an atmosphere where innovation is appreciated, understood by everybody, all students, all faculty, including the administration. And finally, my last question, and I will maybe elaborate it a little later, what can we still learn from Albert Einstein? Now, Albert Einstein was one of the greatest innovators in the history of mankind, but this is not the kind of innovation when we talk today about innovation. Still, I mention Einstein because my university is fortunate to have more than 80,000 documents that Einstein bequeathed to us because he was one of the founders of the university. What we can learn from Einstein is more how he thought, how he asked questions. The importance of asking questions is a very important lesson. But the greatest lesson that we can learn from Einstein, and most people do not know it, even my colleague physicists do not know it, that Einstein is a scientist who, more than any other great scientist, published wrong papers, more than anybody else. The tolerance of failure is a very important quality that we should also cultivate, encourage, understand. I will talk more about questions. There is one other element which I want to mention here. In the educational system, universities and below, we teach results. All our textbooks teach results. That is knowledge. When you study somebody like Einstein, you cannot fail to emphasize the method, how those results are obtained, how many wrong steps on the way are taken. I think that universities in the future already now in my university, it's beginning to happen, put an emphasis on teaching methods and not only results. So I have these three elements, which I think are very important elements in every future educational system. Asking questions, tolerance of failure, understanding of ambiguities, and respect for the method. Thank you.
So I'll build upon what has already been said. And my advice for universities and for societies that pressure universities to think through what it is that they should be offering society is to go back and think through all of those questions that were already posed. The mere fact that we are having a conversation about what it is that a university education should be about is already a unique conversation. It's a conversation that almost never happens in global universities, primarily because universities are obsessed with discipline. They're obsessed with the dissemination of information or the exploration and creation of new information in one particular field. And, as my colleagues here on stage have noted, this is not the way the world actually works. Forget about the future. It's not the way the world works today. And so the question should then be, well, what do we do when we are faced with these dichotomies? How do we think about the social versus the adaptive? How do we think about the methodology versus the basic knowledge? How do we understand where a university should put emphasis when it comes to the design of its program? How do they even approach that design? And my perspective is hinted at John's last slide, which is the concept of the liberal arts. Now, I bet that unless you've heard me speak before, almost none of the people who've not heard me talk about liberal arts know what liberal arts means. So I will take a pause, and I'll ask you for 15 seconds to think in your minds, when I say a liberal arts education, what do you think that means? Formulate an answer in your mind. All right. Now, how many of you, by a show of hands, think that a liberal arts education is related to poetry or the humanities? Anybody wants to raise their hands? You have to participate in this. Okay, good. How many of you believe that if you were to study, for example, engineering or business, that would mean that you are not learning a liberal art? Okay, only a couple of you. That's interesting. There could be that a number of you are just not participating whatsoever. How many of you in the audience are actually listening to what is being said? Okay, good. So that gives you a basis. That's a good understanding. Well, the reality is that liberal arts education have nothing to do with subject matter. The source of the term comes from ancient Rome. In ancient Rome, there was a brief period in Roman history when the Romans decided to become a republic. And they realized that the citizens had to actually participate in multiple aspects of day-to-day life. They no longer could just be specialized in one field from the day they started to work until the day they died. Now, does that sound familiar? It turns out that no matter what system of government we live in today, we live in a world that the Romans thought about 2,000 years ago. And what they understood is that if people are going to live in this new world back then, the world that we all know today, that students needed to be educated in the various disciplines or arts that allow them to have freedom or liberty. The liberal arts are an approach to the kind of education that is necessary for you to be able to have the freedom to change careers, the freedom to work in one employer and then a different one, to get promoted, to change what you do. And the way in which a liberal arts education needs to be delivered in an era of an abundance of information is one where the approach to education doesn't have to choose between each of those elements, but uses new techniques to combine them and deliver them.
Thank you. Just a few questions for all of you, and I'd love you to respond to each other as well. But starting, Alexey, how do you innovate? How do you use technology effectively while keeping the primacy of the professor? How do you keep technology from getting between the students and the faculty?
Да, это очень важный вопрос сегодня. Я думаю, что главное для нас это все-таки личность учителя, а технологии, в том числе цифровые, которые сегодня так активно продвигаются, это тот инструмент, который позволяет быть учителю свободным в своем творчестве. И, на мой взгляд, вот именно к этой модели мы стараемся продвинуться, не делая особых приоритетов и не поклоняясь полностью перед технологиям, а считаем, что личность и свобода творчества учителя – это очень важно.
这个问题，在我们学校里也是非常重要的。怎么去保障教师的自由和运用先进技术，最终主要的目标还是保障自由。是我们学校里面现在是在建设和在开展的模式。我们没有太大的，我们对先进技术也没有太大的要求，主要是发展和培养教师的人格。
Ben, there's a lot of talk among innovators that the degree might be over, that certificates and credentials of one sort or another might replace the traditional university degree. Where are you on that?
All right, I'll ask the audience, because I think the audience knows better. When you hire a student or an employee of any kind, how many of you ask to see the transcript of that student in college? 2 of you? 1.5? We've had certificates since the beginning of education. They're called course grades. Nobody cares. Maybe one person cares. The reality is that granular information is not useful information when it comes to making life decisions. It just doesn't work. We can't process that information, and we don't even know how, even if we had it in front of us. What we look for is an aggregation. We look for some signal that a person will be right for a job, some kind of assessment of it, and we do not rely on granular assessments by third parties. So I think that the credentialing is a fool's errand.
Hanoch, you spoke about cross-disciplinary learning as critical. How do you square that with Ben's comments and with degrees in general? How do you make it work for employers?
Now, let me add one element to this cross-disciplinary learning, which was not mentioned here. And I think it's essential, and that's another lesson that we can learn from Einstein and even from Newton. And that is the formation of a worldview, a comprehensive worldview. And a comprehensive worldview is not only science, engineering, and technology. The vital importance of humanities and social sciences in this, and even in this innovation process of coping with the problems that face mankind, how to feed mankind, how to cure mankind, all that cannot make progress without that. So when I talk about an interdisciplinary mindset, humanities is an essential part of that. In my university, among the changes, every student today from every disciplinary faculty is required to take at least 2 courses from the other side, from the other culture. So that's one thing which is very, very important. Now, how do I reconcile that with Ben's remarks about we are not there yet. We are not there yet with introducing online technologies. We still believe that a lot can still be done and has to be done and improved with the traditional concept of the professor and several professors and the younger assistants and guides in a learning process where students are participate more than in the past, when they cross boundaries between disciplines. So we are not there yet, but we are changing in a very significant way.
I'll push on you a little bit on that. How exactly are you innovating in the ways you're describing? Where is the end game? We're not there yet. Where is there?
Where is there yet? Because our friend from Moscow discussed technologies, and you posed several questions about the effect of online technologies on computer aiding teaching. That's what I meant. We are not there yet. We are not using it in a significant way. But, as I said before, we are changing very significantly along the lines that I just indicate. For example, we have recently created a very unique center that every visitor to the university wants to see. It's called We Innovate. And that is a center which is exactly aimed to create this new mindset. Students, undergraduate students, are encouraged to entrepreneur and innovate. Now, I do not expect every student to be an entrepreneur. That would be a disaster. Not everything is high-tech. But I expect an atmosphere at a university where everybody knows, the university, the administration, the faculty, all the other students, what is happening, how this is encouraged. And we have many such hubs of innovation, of entrepreneuring. And entrepreneuring and innovation is not only in technology and science. It's also in education, it's also in humanities, it's everywhere.
So along those lines, Alexey, you have a dual burden. The school itself innovating, and you're the premier teachers of teachers in Russia. How do you teach them to innovate and use these technologies even as you're figuring them out?
Я хочу продолжить мысль своего коллеги относительно того, что сегодня междисциплинарность, синтез различных наук и предметов – это и есть основа творчества личности.
我还想补充一下，就刚才我的同行也说到了，跨学科的重要性，在发展一个人格和创新思维方式的重要性。
Когда-то Эйнштейн сказал, что для него музыка Баха и романы Достоевского сделали гораздо больше, чем лекции по теоретической физике. Это и есть та способность к инновациям, к креативности, к творчеству, которая заложена в каждом человеке. И, конечно, учитель учителей должен уметь зажечь эту искру творчества в каждом ученике. Отсюда и новые подходы к образованию, индивидуализация, персонализация, акценты на психологии, на когнитивистике. Это целый спектр тех гуманитарных знаний о человеке, которые мы сегодня можем предложить нашим студентам.
But, just one small remark. If you saw, and we have Einstein's private library. He played Bach, and he has Dostoevsky and Tolstoy,
Yes.
everything in German.
So I'll try to speak in English. So Einstein said before that the Bach music and the novels of Dostoevsky played more role for him to develop him than lecture of theoretical physics. This also developing the innovation ability and innovation mindset in one person. Me, as you said, a teacher of teachers, is very important to develop this kind of mindset in my university. This kind of mindset, developing creating new. A new way of solving problems, new way of solving innovation problems, and inspiring for the innovation mindset.
Then international is a large part of the Minerva methodology. Students studying in different countries on different semesters. How is that working out? Why is it important?
Well, it's interesting because it's an aspect of why the Minerva education is so radical, and it's related to actually what has been set up here, because the way that our brains work is fundamentally grounded in context. And that's why when you go and talk to universities, even when you talk about cross-disciplinarity or interdisciplinarity, it refers back to the discipline. It refers back to the context. And so we heard people talk about, well, it's not just about science, it's also about the humanities. It's not just about business, it's also about the arts. But that's actually not useful for human beings in their education. What Hanoch talked about before is the concept of methodologies. And methodologies and approaches are important to learn in a cross-contextual way, but defined. Defined not within a context and then redefined, but defined in an absolute basis and then recontextualized. So this may sound like a nuance, but it's extraordinarily important. It turns out that if you teach methodologies within subject, the ability for a human being to interact with a new subject and apply those methodologies is almost non-existent. The same thing is true of culture. if you teach an individual to navigate their lives in a particular culture, their ability to transfer those same skills into a different culture is incredibly difficult. And this is why a trans-contextual education, where the primacy of the frameworks of thinking is the subject matter, and then the context presented to the student, whether they be various disciplines, whether they be cultures, ideally both, whether they be physical locations, circumstances, historical periods, these are the types of things that enable the mind to apply frameworks broadly. And that really is the next step in education. And institutions have to understand, and if they're grounded in context and try to increment from there, they will never achieve the kind of breakthrough education that we require in such a fast-paced world.
Well, I perfectly agree. And when I talk about cross-disciplinary or interdisciplinarity, I do not mean that the physicist will stop being a physicist and the biologist stop being a biologist. I give you an example, which I personally had something to do with at the Hebrew University. We established, I was very instrumental in that, that was my field at that time, a center in brain research. Now, brain research was studied either by biologists in the past, doctors, or philosophers. The modern brain research that we then established, and that was the first in the world. Today, every university has that. Has physicists and mathematicians and computer scientists and psychologists and psycholinguists and philosophers and physicists. They all remain the same in their field, but they sit together. Their students know what all the other students do. They are aware of it. And this is the modus operandi, the mode of operation that we should apply to many more phenomena. When I talk about a shift from a strictly disciplinary structure of a university to something that is more, I didn't mean phenomena, I mean phenomena structure. That is the climate, that is the environment, that is this, there are other social issues that inquire and that require many traditional disciplines to make progress. So we agree on that.
So collaboration between disciplines and collaboration across countries.
And using frameworks that will transcend all of them. And the frameworks not deriving from a discipline, but as tools to be applied to any of them.
No, I just comments on that. Sure, nothing to add? Okay. A question about failure. Hanoch mentioned how important it was. At the same time, we hear both in K-12 and higher ed, well, this is my kid. And I'm not that interested in your experiment on my kid. How do you innovate in a culture that is risk averse? Alexey.
Да, очень интересная тема. Две цитаты. У Януша Корчика есть такое выражение: надо испытывать уважение к ошибкам наших детей. Это фундаментальная основа. Дети учатся, постигая мир, открывая его, совершая ошибки. Но совершая ошибки, они постигают мир.
Janusz Korczyk told that we have to have respect for the mistakes of our children. Yeah, children, they're making mistakes, but that's how they learn actually.
And second, Тарковский, наш великий режиссер, другую грань познания мира – это то, что истину никогда нельзя преподавать. Истину надо пережить. То есть момент истины – это и момент, который включает ошибки, опыт. Любые ошибки, в том числе и негативный опыт, это всегда тернистый путь познания.
Our scientific Tarkovsky, scientific Tarkovsky told that the total truth is, you cannot teach the total truth, you have to experience it. So the absolutely true, the absolutely right thing is coming from your experience, from your mistakes, and from your failure.
Easy to say.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I'll say that, I hear this often, especially from professors who love finding reasons why not to do certain things. And the reality is, at Minerva, we've never run a single experiment, not one. All we've done is taken what decades of experimental research has proven and implemented it. And so the reality is that the evidence at the failure of the current pedagogical model is so vast that in the Proceeding of National Academy of Science in the United States, they did a literature review of all of the research on the science of learning. And they concluded 3 years ago that if you run an experiment, a controlled experiment, and you use a lecture as your control, you're committing scientific malpractice. Because the lecture has a worse educational outcome than a sugar pill. And so the reality is that when institutions say, oh, well, we're not sure what will happen if we actually implement things that have been proven over and over again for decades in real-life classrooms, in experimental environments, we'll just stick to what we're doing because that's safe. They're sticking to something that anybody in the science of learning understands is an unethical way of teaching. And so it's less about conservatism in trying not to experiment. It's actually quite the opposite. It's being comfortable with the status quo. It's inertia.
I agree with you, but a few minutes, so the final remark, I want to emphasize a little more this question of disciplines. There will be a message here. You see, the division of the body of human knowledge into disciplines is a relatively young phenomenon, only 200 years old. I don't know how many, you all know that Newton was a great physicist. I don't know how many of you know that if you count the words of what he wrote, only 12% is physics. Everything else is the rest. Then the body of knowledge grew and it compelled us to divide it into disciplines. Now I sense, and I think it's very important, that we move back a little, not to Newton, that is impossible, but to the kind of cross-disciplinary and education that Ben and I now described. I think this has already happened. It will happen even more. It is very important to make universities more effective in the challenge of preparing the young to the future.
Hanoch, you have correctly said we are running out of time, so last comment. Alexey.
Чем больше мы познаем, тем больше у нас остается непознанного, но творческое начало в человеке – это и есть тот импульс, тот ресурс, который позволяет нам двигаться вперед.
The more we know, the more we learn, the more questions we have. But we are sure that the artistical beginning of the person is the resource of future development of the person.
I think that for me, the key takeaway is you start with asking the right questions about institutional design, and then you figure out how you can create an institutional design without compromise.
That's great. Well, thank you all, and thank you guys very much.
感谢嘉宾的精彩分享。Thank you to the speakers for the insightful sharing.